There are moments in life when the person you trust most begins to feel like a stranger. You can't quite explain it, but something deep in your gut whispers that something's off. Maybe it's the way she looks at you now, or how her words sound right but somehow feel wrong. Most people dismiss that inner voice. They call it insecurity or paranoia. But often, it's your intuition picking up on subtle cues before your conscious mind can. Your body and emotions sense disconnection long before your logic catches up. And when guilt enters a relationship, especially guilt from betrayal, it has a way of revealing itself in behavior, tone, and energy long before any confession ever happens. Let's talk about what that looks like. This isn't about paranoia or playing detective. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing when something deep within your relationship has shifted. Not because you're looking for lies, but because you value emotional honesty and mental health for both of you. When guilt takes root in someone's heart, it creates tension between their inner truth and their outer presentation. That tension leaks out in countless ways, from how they speak to how they touch you. One of the first and most confusing signs is an outpouring of affection. Suddenly, she's more loving, more attentive, more physically expressive. She plans surprises, buys gifts, says, "I love you" constantly, and behaves as though you've stepped into a new honeymoon phase. On the surface, this feels amazing, but what's really happening underneath may be emotional overcompensation. Guilt creates psychological pressure, an inner imbalance. To ease that discomfort, a person might flood the relationship with positive gestures to subconsciously make up for what they did. Each affectionate act becomes an attempt to restore moral equilibrium, not necessarily to deepen love, but to quiet guilt. This is called reactive idealization, a temporary burst of loving behavior triggered by remorse. In relationships, this can be incredibly confusing for the other partner. You may think things are improving, that you've both grown closer, that love is being renewed. But if that affection feels frantic, inconsistent, or emotionally charged rather than calm and connected, it might not be about genuine intimacy. It might be about psychological relief. True affection is steady and grounded. Guilty affection often feels a little too much, too soon, too sudden. Then there's defensiveness. When guilt and fear of exposure collide, people sometimes become hypersensitive. You ask a normal question, "Hey, where were you earlier?" And instead of a calm answer, you're met with irritation, anger, or accusations. This behavior is known in psychology as a preemptive defense. The guilty mind expects to be questioned, so it lashes out first, hoping to push back the perceived threat. The emotional reaction serves as armor. It's not about you, it's about her fear of being found out. The challenge here is emotional confusion. Most partners, especially those who are caring and conflict avoidant, back down. They assume they've said something wrong or that their question was unfair. But a stable relationship can handle simple curiosity and communication without explosion. When every inquiry feels like walking through a minefield, it's a signal that something deeper is being protected. Defensiveness in small doses is normal. Chronic misplaced defensiveness points to unresolved guilt. Another subtle behavior shift happens when she suddenly becomes deeply interested in your daily routine. She asks where you're going, when you'll be back, what time your meetings end, whether you're seeing friends afterward. At first, this might seem sweet, like she cares more, like she wants to stay connected. But when it becomes unusually detailed or constant, it may be more about management than connection. Guilt often coexists with fear of discovery. Knowing your exact movements provides safety for someone juggling a hidden truth. It's not born from curiosity, it's about control. Psychologically, this is a form of situational reassurance, collecting information to maintain a false sense of security. Again, it's important to stay balanced in how you interpret this. Genuine interest in your day is healthy. Excessive checking or planning that feels tactical or unnecessary may indicate something else. The difference lies in the energy behind the questions, whether they come from love and connection or from calculation and anxiety. Then there are physical and emotional shifts in intimacy. When guilt enters the body, it doesn't just stay in the mind. It manifests through energy, emotion, and even touch. Some people shut down sexually. They feel inauthentic, uncomfortable, or ashamed, and the idea of physical closeness becomes painful. Others experience the opposite reaction. They seek more sex, more intensity, more novelty as a way to convince themselves that the relationship is still real, still alive. Both reactions stem from the same root, guilt-driven dissonance. If your partner suddenly loses interest in intimacy, you might think you've done something wrong. If she suddenly becomes more passionate and experimental, you might think things are getting better. But in truth, any dramatic, unexplained shift, up or down, can signal inner turmoil. The body reflects the mind's struggle. Someone wrestling with guilt may use physical intimacy either as avoidance or atonement. It's not a conscious choice, it's a psychological reflex. Another behavior you might notice is projection, accusing you of something you haven't done. She starts to question your loyalty, becomes suspicious about your messages, or demands reassurance. This isn't random paranoia. In psychology, projection is when a person attributes their own unwanted feelings or actions to someone else. It's a way to reduce guilt by externalizing it. By convincing herself that you might be unfaithful, she can subconsciously justify or normalize her own actions. It's also an effective emotional distraction. If you're on the defensive, you're less likely to question her behavior. This pattern can create emotional exhaustion for both partners. You might spend energy trying to prove your faithfulness, not realizing that the real issue isn't your behavior, it's her guilt. Understanding this doesn't mean you accept unfair accusations. It means you see the psychological mechanism at work, and you stay grounded rather than reactive. One of the most visually obvious signs of internal change is a sudden transformation in appearance. A new hairstyle, new clothes, new workouts, these can all be positive signs of self-care. But when they happen abruptly, intensely, and without clear motivation, they may indicate a renewed drive for external validation. Romantic guilt often intersects with the desire to reclaim attractiveness. On a subconscious level, the person seeks to feel desired again, either to please a new partner or to quiet the dissonance of their actions by overinvesting in self-image. Healthy change happens gradually. Sudden, radical reinvention often carries emotional urgency. It's not that change itself is wrong, it's about whether it's grounded in genuine self-love or driven by emotional imbalance. These signs are not proof of betrayal, and that's crucial to understand. Each one can appear for other reasons: stress, emotional distance, personal change. But when several of these behaviors appear together, when patterns of overcompensation, secrecy, defensiveness, and emotional volatility align, it's time to listen to your intuition. Not to accuse, but to understand. When people hide guilt, it's not because they are evil. It's because they are human, afraid, and ashamed. Guilt distorts behavior and speech because the mind is trying to manage an unbearable contradiction, wanting to maintain love while concealing harm. The result is confusion, avoidance, and anxiety. Recognizing these signals isn't about punishment. It's about emotional literacy, about knowing what guilt looks like when words fail to tell the truth. Let's continue exploring how guilt and secrecy quietly reshape a relationship's emotional landscape. One of the most revealing modern signs appears not in behavior or tone, but in technology. In today's world, our phones are extensions of ourselves, digital diaries containing our conversations, memories, and private lives. When guilt enters the picture, a partner's relationship with their phone can change dramatically. Suddenly, it's never left unattended. It's always face down, password protected, and never shared. You notice a subtle tension when you're near it, a flicker of anxiety when a message comes in. This behavior stems from fear of exposure, not necessarily of you, but of the truth living inside that small device. In psychological terms, it's called behavioral avoidance. But the phone becomes both a source of comfort and a source of panic, holding evidence of divided attention or emotional duality. Yet this sign must be read with care. People have a right to privacy. Healthy relationships respect boundaries. But there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy says, I trust you, but I also value personal space. And secrecy says, I'm hiding something that could harm you. The energy behind the behavior tells the story. Emotional instability often follows. A person carrying guilt rides an internal emotional roller coaster. Moments of affection followed by detachment, laughter followed by unexplained sadness, patience replaced by irritability. This is not random moodiness, it's cognitive dissonance in action, the mental conflict between a person's values and their choices. When someone's actions clash with their self-image, their nervous system can fluctuate wildly as it tries to reconcile the two realities. You may feel this inconsistency deeply, sensing that the emotional rhythm of the relationship no longer feels predictable or safe. Instead of reacting with frustration, it's often better to observe with compassion. Emotional chaos doesn't excuse deception, but it does reveal human fragility. Someone overwhelmed by guilt is not in control of their emotions. They're wrestling with themselves. The problem isn't only what they've done, it's that they're living two truths at once. Then come the inconsistencies in storytelling, the small cracks in the narrative. Maybe she's vague about where she's been, or her details shift from one version to another. These are not always deliberate lies. Sometimes they're memory failures caused by the strain of maintaining two realities. The human brain encodes genuine experiences differently from fabricated ones. Real memories are rich in sensory details and flow easily. False ones are thin, fragmented, and require effort to maintain. When someone is concealing the truth, they often keep their stories minimal and general to reduce the risk of contradiction. Healthy communication thrives on openness and texture. When stories become hollow or oddly rehearsed, it's a signal of emotional withdrawal. You may not need to interrogate every inconsistency, but you should pay attention to the overall pattern. Trust isn't destroyed by one vague answer. It erodes through repeated uncertainty. Another subtle sign appears when the topic of the future suddenly feels uncomfortable. You bring up shared plans, travel, moving, marriage, and she sidesteps or changes the subject. It's not always because she's lost interest in you personally. It's often because her guilt makes it painful to picture a future built on dishonesty. Planning long-term requires alignment between intention and action. When a person knows, even subconsciously, that they violated that alignment, discussing the future activates shame. This withdrawal is an emotional defense mechanism to avoid self-confrontation. In this phase, many partners misinterpret avoidance as fear of commitment or emotional immaturity. Sometimes that's true, but often it's deeper. A signal that the emotional foundation has cracked and the person can't bear to look at it. If you sense this pattern, the healthiest approach isn't accusation, but clarity. Guilt thrives in silence. Honesty begins with open dialogue. By now, it's clear that none of these behaviors, affection bursts, defensiveness, secrecy, mood swings, vague stories, avoidance, mean much in isolation. Life is complicated. Stress, personal struggles, mental health issues, or even unrelated anxiety can trigger similar reactions. That's why the goal isn't to play detective, but to recognize patterns. When several of these signs overlap and persist, it's time to pause and reflect, not panic. At its core, this awareness isn't about catching someone. It's about understanding human behavior through the lens of emotional health. When guilt is unspoken, it doesn't vanish. It transforms into stress, fear, irritability, and sometimes physical symptoms. The body tightens, sleep becomes restless, appetite changes, and emotional regulation weakens. The guilty mind seeks relief but fears exposure, creating a psychological loop that affects both partners. If you're on the receiving end of this, the most powerful thing you can do is return to calm observation. Resist the urge to accuse or prove. Instead, ground yourself in curiosity and emotional intelligence. Ask open questions, listen to tone and context, not just words. Give space for honesty to surface without threat. Often, guilt dissolves not under confrontation, but under compassionate clarity. When someone feels truly seen, they're more likely to confront their own conscience. Remember, guilt is not always proof of betrayal. It can arise from emotional disconnection, hidden unhappiness, or unresolved trauma. A partner may act off not because of deceit, but because of suppressed pain. The key is to balance intuition with empathy. Your body and emotions are incredible instruments. They register patterns and tension that logic might ignore. But wisdom lies in how you respond. Instead of suspicion, approach what you feel with awareness and calm strength. You can think of this process as emotional health maintenance. Just as you'd pay attention to early signs of physical illness, fatigue, pain, or imbalance, you should pay attention to relational symptoms too. Behavioral changes are the body's emotional language. They tell you when something beneath the surface needs care, attention, or honest conversation. A relationship built on awareness is a relationship that can heal. When both partners learn to recognize guilt not as an enemy but as a signal for growth, communication becomes deeper and more authentic. Facing guilt together can even strengthen connection because it opens the door to vulnerability, forgiveness, and accountability. When awareness begins to replace confusion, something powerful happens. You stop reacting to uncertainty and start responding to truth. The human mind is built to seek coherence, to bring alignment between what we feel and what we know. When that alignment breaks, discomfort arises. That discomfort, often mistaken for jealousy or anxiety, is actually a call for honesty, both from others and from ourselves. So what do you do when your instincts are alert? When your inner voice whispers that something's not right? The first step is to breathe. Emotional clarity begins with calmness. Acting from fear or anger only clouds judgment. Take time to observe patterns without rushing to conclusions. Are there consistent shifts in behavior, affection that feels forced, defensiveness without cause, secrecy that grows stronger, emotional instability that never quite resolves? Notice, but don't accuse. Awareness is powerful precisely because it's steady and grounded. The next step is reflection. Ask yourself, how is this situation affecting my own emotional health? Guilt doesn't only harm the person carrying it, it slowly seeps into the relationship, eroding trust, peace, and self esteem for both partners. If you find yourself walking on eggshells or doubting your perception constantly, it's time to protect your mental well being. Emotional awareness isn't about control, it's about clarity and self respect. When the time feels right, have a conversation, but have it from a place of calm authority, not suspicion. Speak your truth honestly. What you've observed, how it makes you feel, and what you need for emotional safety. Avoid framing it as an interrogation. Instead, invite openness. Say things like, I feel there's some distance between us and it's been worrying me, or I sense tension when I ask simple questions. Can we talk about that? The goal isn't to corner someone into confession, it's to create space for truth to breathe. In some cases, you might discover that your fears were unfounded. Maybe her stress, her family pressures, or mental health challenges were driving her mood and behavior. That's why compassion matters, because misunderstanding happens easily when communication breaks down. In other cases, however, you may uncover painful truths. If that happens, remember this. Knowing the truth is always better than living in quiet confusion. The truth allows healing to begin. Lies keep both people trapped in emotional paralysis. No matter the outcome, your responsibility is the same: to honor your own boundaries, to stand firm in self-respect, and to maintain your emotional integrity. You deserve relationships where trust feels natural, not negotiated every day through doubt and fear. You deserve to feel safe sharing your heart without wondering if it's being mirrored honestly. Understanding the psychology of guilt isn't about labeling people as good or bad. It's about recognizing that dishonesty, however painful, often grows from fear. People hide what they can't face, not because they want to hurt others, but because they can't handle hurting themselves. Still, awareness doesn't mean acceptance of deception. Compassion and boundaries can coexist. You can care about someone and still refuse to tolerate dishonesty. If you're the one feeling guilt, this awareness applies to you too. The weight of a secret eats away at the mind. It disturbs sleep, amplifies stress, and triggers physical symptoms like fatigue or anxiety. The longer guilt remains buried, the more damage it does. Admitting the truth may feel terrifying, but it's also the only path to genuine peace. Healing begins when the inner and outer selves finally match. For anyone listening who has ever doubted their instincts, trust yourself. Your intuition is an ancient form of intelligence. It reads tone, timing, body language, and emotional rhythm with incredible precision. It knows before your mind does when something is off. That doesn't mean you act on every fear. It means you respect the signal and explore it calmly. Intuition, when balanced with empathy and reason, becomes one of the strongest tools for emotional well-being. The point of all this isn't to create paranoia, it's to empower awareness. Recognizing the signs of guilt and dishonesty isn't about proving you're right, it's about reclaiming your clarity. It's about listening to what your emotions are telling you without letting fear control the narrative. It's about understanding that love requires honesty not just between two people, but within oneself. If you find yourself at a crossroads, uncertain, uneasy, sensing that something is being hidden, remember that silence helps no one. Whether you choose to seek the truth, rebuild trust, or walk away, do it from a place of strength and dignity. You cannot control another person's choices, but you can control your response. You can choose awareness over confusion, calmness over chaos, and self-respect over self-doubt. Relationships thrive when truth is present and collapse when guilt takes over. The signs may be subtle, but your heart always knows when the rhythm has changed. Don't ignore it. Don't overreact to it either. Meet it with the courage to see, the compassion to understand, and the wisdom to act. Because at the end of the day, awareness is freedom. It's the light that turns uncertainty into understanding, fear into clarity, and pain into growth. You deserve a relationship built on trust, honesty, and emotional peace. And that begins with listening, not to the noise around you, but to the quiet truth inside you.